The courtroom went silent. Not the normal kind of silent. The kind where even the judge stops writing. Judge Sandra Merritt had been on the bench for 23 years. She had seen everything. Divorces. Murders. Corporate fraud. She never reacted. That was her reputation. Unshakable. Cold. Impossible to rattle. But right now, she was staring. Not at the attorneys. Not at the documents on her desk. At her. At the woman in the gray suit sitting completely alone on the left side of that courtroom. The woman whose own mother hadn't saved her a seat. Nobody could figure out why the judge looked like that. Nobody except one person. And that person hadn't spoken a single word yet. Her family was already laughing. Not out loud. They were too careful for that. But Claire felt it. She always felt it. Her brother Daniel. The golden one, the heir, the one their father had supposedly left everything to, leaned over to his expensive attorney and whispered something. The attorney nodded. Almost smiled. Her sister Patricia hadn't looked up from her phone once. Their mother was sitting behind Daniel. In the front row. Right behind him. Like a wall. Claire was across the aisle. Alone. With a folder on the table in front of her and a cup of cold coffee she hadn't touched. To her family, this was already finished. Claire had filed a challenge against the estate. Against the will. Against everything. And to them, that was almost funny. The little sister. Making noise. Finally needing attention. Just handle it, Claire. They had said that her whole life. And she had. Every single time. But what they didn't know, what they had never once stopped to ask, was what exactly she had been handling. Her name was Claire Whitmore. 43 years old. If you asked her family to describe her, they'd probably say, quiet. Reliable. Invisible. She was the youngest of 3. And in the Whitmore family that meant one specific thing. It meant you came last. Always. Her brother Daniel was the golden one, first son. Took up all the space in every room he entered. Their father had spent 40 years building a construction company from nothing, and everyone assumed Daniel would inherit it. Daniel assumed it. Their mother assumed it. It was just understood. Her sister Patricia was the beautiful one. Married well. Drove a good car. Showed up at Christmas with expensive wine and left before the dishes were done. And then there was Claire. Claire, who had driven their mother to 37 doctor appointments over 4 years. Claire, who had managed the household finances when their father got sick. Claire, who had reorganized the entire business accounting system when Daniel almost ran it into the ground in 2019. And never told anyone she'd done it. She was just the little sister. That's what they called her. Not as a joke. As a fact. Let the little sister handle it. And she always did. But here's the question nobody ever thought to ask. What does someone learn when they spend their whole life handling things nobody else wants to look at? Their father Gerald Whitmore died on a Thursday in November. 78 years old. Long illness. He had known it was coming. He had time to prepare. And he did prepare. Very carefully. 2 days after the funeral, before Claire had even finished washing the dishes from the reception, Daniel called a family meeting. He sat at their father's kitchen table like he already owned it. He placed a document in the center. Thick. Official looking. Already notarized. The will. It left everything to Daniel and Patricia. The house. The business. All 4 accounts. The investment portfolio their father had quietly built over 30 years. Claire received one item. Her father's watch. An old one. And a handwritten note tucked inside the box. I'm sorry I didn't say this more. I'm proud of you. She sat there holding that note while Daniel was already talking about timelines for selling the property. She didn't cry. Not because it didn't hurt. Because something felt wrong. 6 months before he died, her father had taken her hand. He was tired that day. More tired than usual. And he said something that she hadn't understood at the time. He said, Claire. If anything happens, don't let them rush anything. Make sure everything goes through the lawyer. The real one. Not the one Daniel uses. She had thought he was confused. Medicated. She had squeezed his hand and changed the subject. Now, sitting at that table, watching Daniel flip through the pages of a will she had never seen before, those words came back to her like a cold wave. The real one. Not the one Daniel uses. She looked at the notary seal on the bottom of the document. She looked at the date. And something in her went very, very still. She waited until everyone left. Then she went home, sat at her kitchen table, and made a phone call. Not to Daniel. Not to Patricia. To Margaret Hollis, the family's original estate attorney. A woman who had known Gerald Whitmore for over 22 years and had drafted every legal document he'd ever signed. Margaret picked up on the second ring. Claire said, "Did you prepare my father's will?" There was a pause. And then Margaret Hollis said 4 words. "I have another document." Another document. Let that land for a second. While Daniel was presenting a will to the family, while he was already talking about selling the business, there was another document. A different one. A real one. Margaret explained it carefully. 14 months before Gerald Whitmore died, he had gone to Margaret's office. Alone. Without telling anyone. He had sat across from her desk and he had said he wanted to update his will. That he had been thinking about things differently. That he wanted the document to reflect, and Margaret remembered his exact words, what actually happened in this family. The new will was very different. It acknowledged Claire specifically. By name. With detail. It described her role in the family's finances. Her caregiving. Her years of invisible work. It called her, and this is the part that made Claire have to put the phone down for a moment, it called her the backbone of everything I built. And it left her the majority of the estate. Daniel had found out. Claire asked how. Margaret went quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I think you need to find that out yourself. Because when you do, you're going to need evidence. Not just my word." Now here is the moment where most people would panic. Most people would call their brother. Cry. Demand an explanation. Make noise. Claire did none of those things. She opened a notebook. And she started writing. Because here is what her family had never once bothered to learn about her. For 12 years, Claire Whitmore had worked in financial compliance. Not accounting. Not bookkeeping. Compliance. Specifically, internal fraud detection. She worked with companies to identify when someone on the inside was manipulating documents, hiding money, forging signatures, creating paper trails that looked real but weren't. She had spent over a decade being the invisible person in corporate boardrooms, the one nobody noticed, finding exactly what powerful people thought they had buried. She knew what forensic document examination looked like. She knew what courts needed to see. She knew exactly how people who thought they were untouchable made mistakes. And right now, her own brother had handed her a case. She spent 6 weeks working at night. She drove 3 hours to meet Margaret Hollis in person and obtain certified copies of both documents. She contacted a forensic document examiner, a man named Dr. Howard Crane. Retired FBI. 30 years of experience. She sent him both wills and asked him one question, "Are these both authentic?" He called her back 11 days later. His voice was flat. Professional. "One of them is not." The document Daniel had presented. The one that left everything to him and Patricia, had been created on paper stock that wasn't commercially manufactured until 16 months after the supposed signing date. The notary seal belonged to a man who had retired in 2018 and died in 2020, 2 years before the document was allegedly signed. And the signature, Gerald Whitmore's signature, showed microtremor inconsistencies consistent with digital copying rather than original pen pressure. Dr. Crane's written report was 22 pages long. His conclusion was 3 words. "This is fraud." She filed the legal challenge. Then she called Daniel. She didn't accuse him. She didn't raise her voice. That was never her style. She simply told him she had retained legal counsel. That she had new information about the estate. And that she wanted to give him one opportunity to speak with her privately before the matter proceeded any further. Silence on the line. Then Daniel laughed. "Claire." He said her name like a sigh. Like she was a minor inconvenience. "Don't embarrass yourself with this. Dad left you the watch." That's what he wanted. You're looking for meaning in a note on a piece of paper because you can't accept that he made his decision. She waited for him to finish. "I'll see you in court," she said. And she hung up. Patricia called 20 minutes later. She wasn't calm. "What is wrong with you? Daniel told me what you're doing. You want to drag our family through court, after everything we've been through, because you're jealous? You have always done this, Claire. Always. You act like the victim. You always need to be the victim. Claire held the phone away from her ear. She had heard this version of herself before. The dramatic one. The needy one. The little sister who couldn't just accept her place. She waited. I'll see you there too, she said. Hung up. The hearing was set for a Tuesday morning in March. Claire arrived 40 minutes early. She sat in the hallway with cold coffee and her case file, and she did something she hadn't done in weeks. She thought about her father. About that moment, him holding her hand. Tired. Trying to warn her. He had known what Daniel was capable of. He had updated his will specifically to protect her. And then he had worried, even from his hospital bed, that it wouldn't be enough. He had trusted her to handle it. One last time. She looked down at the watch on her wrist. The old one. His. She took one breath. And she walked into the courtroom. Daniel and Patricia arrived together. Their attorney, a man named Greer, expensive suit, very confident walk, came through the door like he owned the building. He glanced at Claire's folder on the table. His expression said, "This will take 20 minutes." The judge entered. The Honorable Sandra Merritt. 61 years old. 23 years on that bench. The kind of judge who had heard every argument, seen every manipulation, and had exactly zero patience for people who treated her courtroom like a performance. The hearing began. Daniel's attorney went first. He was polished. He spoke about Gerald Whitmore's lifelong intention to leave his legacy to his son. He spoke about family tradition. He spoke about the emotional difficulty of contested estates and how sometimes grief caused people to see things that weren't there. He spoke for 12 minutes. He never once said Claire's name. Then Claire's attorney, Susan Park, quiet, precise, someone who chose every word like it cost money, rose and asked permission to introduce new evidence. Greer objected immediately. Judge Merritt looked at him over her glasses. She has every right to present her case, counselor. Sit down. He sat down. Susan Park placed 3 items in front of the court. The certified second will, Gerald Whitmore's actual final wishes. The 22-page forensic report from Dr. Howard Crane. And a signed affidavit from Margaret Hollis confirming she had prepared the document 14 months before Gerald's death, at his personal request, following 3 separate review meetings. The courtroom went very quiet. Greer recovered fast. He was good at his job. He challenged the chain of custody. He questioned Dr. Crane's methodology. He suggested, gently, carefully, that Margaret Hollis was 74 years old and that memory was a complicated thing. Judge Merritt listened to every word. Then she asked one question. She looked directly at Greer. Counselor, can you explain why the paper stock in your client's document was not commercially manufactured until 16 months after the alleged signing date? Silence. We may need additional time too. That's what I thought, said Judge Merritt. She called a recess. Claire sat in her chair. She looked over at Daniel for the first time that morning. He wasn't smiling anymore. He was staring at the table in front of him like he was doing math and the numbers weren't working. Patricia had put her phone away. Their mother was completely still. None of them looked at Claire. That was fine. Claire wasn't looking for their eyes. Judge Merritt returned. She didn't waste time. She stated clearly that the document presented by Daniel Whitmore had failed multiple tests of forensic authenticity. She noted that the estate attorney's testimony was consistent, detailed, and supported by physical evidence. She formally accepted the second will as the valid and final expression of Gerald Whitmore's wishes. Then she looked at Daniel. And she said 2 words. Forensic referral. The matter was being referred to investigators for potential criminal fraud charges. Daniel's face went the color of paper. His attorney was already leaning in, whispering fast. But that wasn't the moment Claire remembered most. What she remembered happened in the 3 minutes after, while the ruling was being recorded. Judge Merritt was reviewing the final paperwork. And she paused. Not officially. Just personally. The way people do sometimes when something catches them. She looked up. She looked directly at Claire. And she said, quietly, but clearly enough for that entire room to hear, "Your father knew exactly what he was doing." Claire drove home alone. No celebration. No calls. She just drove. Windows down. March air. The city moving past her like it had no idea what had just happened. She thought about her father sitting across from Margaret Hollis 14 months before he died, quietly updating his will, making sure someone wrote down what actually happened in that family. He knew he might not be there to say it himself. So he made sure it was on paper. The backbone of everything I built. She touched the watch on her wrist. And for the first time in a very long time, she cried. Not from sadness. Just from finally being seen. The months that followed were not a fairy tale. Daniel hired a second attorney and attempted to delay the criminal referral. He largely failed. The forensic evidence was too clean. Too documented. Too airtight. Because the woman who had built it had spent 12 years doing exactly this for a living. The construction company was frozen pending estate resolution. The accounts were audited. Patricia called twice. The first call was defensive. I didn't know what he was doing. The second call was something closer to an apology, but not quite. More like someone who wanted to feel like they had apologized without actually saying the words. Claire was polite. She was civil. She did not pretend. The estate settled 8 months after the hearing. Claire received what her father had intended. The acknowledgement. The share. The recognition that had been on paper for over a year before anyone let her see it. She didn't keep everything. She sold the business, properly, professionally, at fair market value. And she used a portion of the proceeds to establish a fund in her father's name. A small fund. For elderly individuals who couldn't afford proper legal representation in estate disputes. Because she knew the truth now. There were so many people like her. People who did everything right and received the watch while someone else took the estate. People who were told to just handle it their entire lives. People who were called the little sister like it explained something. Like it settled something. Like it was an answer instead of an insult. She still wears the watch. Every day now. Not as a reminder of what she nearly lost. As a reminder of what her father already knew. That quiet is not the same thing as weak. That invisible is not the same thing as unimportant. That the person who has been handling everything for everyone. Watching everything. Learning everything. Documenting everything. Is sometimes the most dangerous person in the room. They just never looked long enough to notice. If you've ever been the one who handled it all and got nothing in return, this one was for you. And if you want more stories about people who were written off, underestimated, overlooked, and then weren't, subscribed. Because there are so many more. See you next time.